Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Sunday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing great out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day and a great weekend out there so far. We got a lot to discuss in this morning's video as we're really going to take a deep dive into what I think could potentially happen as we get into February. Now, of course, we still have a few days left in January, and I don't want to get too deep into February, but I'm starting to think that we're just going to have some wild swings in the month of February. I think we could be warm for a several day period, then we can be cold for a several day period. I think we're going to have severe weather chances. I think we're going to have winter storm chances, some of those same areas that have severe weather shots. So I just think we're just going to have wild swings. And if you think about it, February normally is like that for a lot of the times. So it's not totally abnormal, but I just get the feeling we're just going to have some wild swings with the weather. So we're going to talk about that. Are we seeing any of those wild swings in some of the long-range model guidance? I'm just going to speak on what we see, explain the setup coming up or the pattern coming up, and talk about a couple storm systems I'm watching specifically. And then I just want to take a look at the longer range and tell you what I mean on how models are just disagreeing with the pattern basically coming up as we get like several days into the month of February. And then of course I got you covered as far as what's going to happen weather-wise for your Sunday for the entire lower 48. So this will be a video where we're kind of everywhere with, and certainly nothing to really latch onto, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but we could have something to latch onto really any given day out ahead of us. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. If you hear any dice rolling in the background, my kids are playing a board game. It's not even 8 o'clock in the morning, but they're out there playing a board game, so that requires rolling dice. So if you hear that faintly in the background, well, just kids playing a board game. Also, let me know if timestamps do not pop up in the video when you click it. I think that happened yesterday, and it just happens, like, I would say a couple times a month, where I'll put timestamps up and then they just kind of won't allocate to the video. So it's kind of weird. So just let me know in the comments if the timestamps are there or if they are not. If you guys got anything I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. So let's start this off by looking at the Climate Prediction Center. The red-orange colors, that's where they're calling for above average temperatures, and the bluer colors is where they're calling for below average temperatures. Now, there is a percent confidence level. For example, if you click this, it's a 70% chance of temperatures being above normal. This is 60, this is 50, this is 40, this is 33. Now, this is for the 31st of January all the way through the 4th. So they are thinking we're going to have a thaw, if you will, a winter thaw, which happens almost every winter. It doesn't matter if the winter altogether is colder than average, which it has been this winter. Almost every winter has a thaw, and then sometimes it never recovers and it stays warm, but most of the time it does get cold again. So this is kind of the central to eastern U.S. thaw coming up. We're going to gradually warm up. In fact, my neck of the woods is supposed to get kind of close to 60 degrees a day, which will feel outstanding compared to how cold it has been. But it is now the western U.S.'s turn to get cold, so you're going for below average temperatures in this time frame. It's kind of weird how they have this little thing kind of going inward like this, but hey, that's what they're rolling with. But the confidence is highest up here in the northern Rockies, the Pacific Northwest, 60% chance of temperatures being below normal. This is 50, this is 40, and this is 33. In the middle, this is kind of the battleground, which I'm going to talk about a lot. I think the central U.S. has an opportunity to get some wild weather over the next couple weeks. Now, the precipitation outlook, I'm not going to focus a whole lot on this, but all I can say is it looks like we're going to be active as far as storm systems. Now, whether this green area is winter weather, whether it's rain, whether it's severe weather, which we will also talk about too in a segment of the video. There's going to be a severe weather opportunity coming up later this work week for the first time in quite some time. It's going to continue to be pretty active as far as storm systems. Now let's go to the 8 to 14 day outlook. This takes us from, let's see, the 2nd of February through the 8th of February. This is when it gets interesting to me. I've seen this look many times. Below average temperatures pretty much has its roots dug into the western and central U.S. and then the southeast and eastern U.S. looks like the ridge is going to dominate your pattern for the foreseeable future. So going for above average temperatures in this area and then below average temperatures not only for the western U.S. but the central U.S. So looks like cold air begins to bleed east. And normally when you have a battleground between above average temperatures and below average temperatures, which is showing up kind of right into here, that's where your road network or avenue is, where kind of your jet is setting up for storm systems to sort of ride through. So to me, this tells me we're going to have a pretty active storm pattern really anywhere, but especially in the middle of the country for winter weather, in my opinion. Now you look at precipitation, the same outlook. Once again, it remains pretty active. Almost the entire lower 48 going for at least slightly above average precipitation chances. And then this darker green, that's a 40% chance. So I do want to show you this. And the Climate Prediction Center outlooks get some heat sometimes. You got some people that say they're horrible, especially if it doesn't fit their agenda and what they want to happen. And let's be real, we all do that occasionally with anything in life. But they did do well from about late December last year and since. I think they called the cold shot very well. Now what's wild is about 4 or 5 days before they posted their 3 to 4 week outlook calling for a cold January, they actually posted a 1 month outlook calling for above average temperatures for the same areas that have been well below average as far as January. So they are definitely hit or miss. They're the definition of it, that's for sure. Sometimes I think this stuff is automated too, but not completely sure of that. But the Euro ensemble, we're going to talk about the pattern. So the blue, that's lower pressure. The blues you see on your screen, like right here, right here, right here, that's lower pressure, typically unsettled weather, maybe a storm system, colder than average temperatures. And then the reds, the oranges, the yellows you see on your screen, that's a ridge. Normally, you got calmer conditions associated with that, above average temperatures, things like that. Not always. It's just a 500 millibar pattern, if you will. So 500 millibars is not the surface. So just remember that. That's several thousand feet up in the air. So we're going to start this for this coming Thursday morning, January the 30th. Here it is right here. And then here it is right here. So we're going to get this in motion. We're going to talk about this storm system, a decent amount in this video. But this is kind of a cutoff low. This is a split flow. This is creating its own flow like this. So, that's not what I want to do. Like this. It's creating southwesterly flow. In fact, it's all going all the way like that. But just focus on this bottom arrow. And then we got steady flow just going like this around this trough up here in Canada that continues to just deliver cold shots into the northeast and just little pieces of energy. We call them clippers. They'll dive down, just bring waves of light to moderate snow, maybe even some snow squalls. So we got a flow up here, and then we got a flow being generated by this cutoff low. So we get all this back off your screen, and we keep this going here. This system right here will steadily bring some unsettled weather, bring us severe weather. This will bring severe weather. These little cutoff lows will do that across Texas, probably Wednesday into Thursday. In fact, we'll talk about the Storm Prediction Center and what their outlooks are saying, and they already are honking the horn at it. But this will eventually weaken as it kind of just gets lost in the ridge. And then what happens after that is a trough. You see this right here, this big blob of blue begins to dive into the western U.S. And once again, we're getting the ridging. See this ridge right here? Spiking all the way up over Alaska. We call that a negative EPO. And basically what that means is just kind of an acronym for a ridge that spikes up to Alaska. If we had troughing the blue right here over Alaska, that means we would have a positive EPO, which probably would not support cold air into the lower 48. But once again, this ridge is spiking warmer than average. I don't know if you've ever heard when it's warm in Alaska, typically it's colder in the lower 48. That is true. There's definitely some truth to that. And most of the time, that is the case. So this ridge spikes here. This immediately dumps cold air back down to the lower 48. But we have a lot of lower pressure troughing up here in Greenland. So this kind of favors a dump of cold air into the western U.S. And that's exactly where it'll head, which makes sense because the Climate Prediction Center is calling for those colder than average temperatures in the western U.S. And here comes that trough. It really just digs very aggressively only in the west. We got this ridge, and this is getting to about day 10, that's spiking over the central and eastern U.S. This is bringing probably continuous above average temperature opportunities for the central and eastern U.S. But eventually, as we get in the long range, like 300 hours out, this trough does begin to situate itself into the central U.S. This brings below average temperature opportunities into the central U.S. And the jury is still out if that continues to move east. The latest Euro Ensemble says, it struggles to. But one thing, if you go all the way to the end, which takes us all the way to the evening of February the 9th, you continue to have this spiking ridge all the way up to Alaska, which is still allowing for cold air to be dumped down into the lower 48. And this is a true cross-polar flow. I mean, this cold air is the origins is from way up here in the higher latitudes. So this is definitely a pattern that supports a cold air from a true cold air source, not just kind of being generated by an upper low, cut off low. So there's definitely going to be a lot of cold air pouring into the lower 48 and for the foreseeable future. It's just where does it kind of pour into the lower 48? The western U.S., central U.S., we know that's going to be the case. When does it eventually move into the eastern U.S.? So if we do take a look at temperatures compared to average based off what you just saw, which is the Euro Ensemble, we'll take a look at it here. We'll start off about a week from today. This is next Sunday morning, February the 2nd. Above average temperatures dominating most of the country. And then I want you to watch these kind of colder looking colors like the greens and the purples and the Barney purple colors and stuff. This is temperatures that are below average. And if you're wondering what the key is, it's right down here. It's very small on your screen, I'm sure. But we keep going here and watch how these well below average temperatures, as we're getting between the day 7 and day 10 time frame, we're getting into the 4th, the 5th, begin to slip into the Rockies, and then eventually get into the central U.S. Now, I think the Euro Ensemble is handling this, I would say, not the best. I think this will come in faster. But in general, once you get past that day 10 time frame, almost a week into February, you're still getting above average temperatures in the eastern U.S. So if you like the warmer temperatures, I think we're going to warm up for the last several days of January, and then even for the first several days of February for the eastern U.S. We're going to get a true winter thaw that's going to last potentially, I would say, at least 7 to 10 days. But here comes the cold. If you live in Texas, points north through the plains, below average temperatures begin to move in. And then this is when I think the weather can get somewhat wild, as you have a temperature gradient, kind of a thermal gradient that really sets up over the middle of the country. And eventually the last few frames of the Euro Ensemble begins to bleed the cold east. But I will tell you, if you compare this to the one I showed you yesterday morning, it wasn't as impressive with it bleeding east. Now, if we look at kind of the GFS Ensemble, what is it showing? It's even more impressive with that temperature gradient. And in fact, it brings the colder air in much quicker than compared to the Euro Ensemble. And there's that gradient I'm talking about, separating well above average temperatures with well below average temperatures. And eventually that does kind of ooze down into the eastern U.S., but it really starts to drop down into the central U.S. And then eventually, if we get pretty far out, it gets kind of just scattered everywhere. You can tell there's mixed signals for sure. But what about storm systems? So there's a lot of things to keep your eye on here. So both your eyeballs might be going two different directions here. But there's a lot going on. So just pay attention to your area specifically. Obviously, if you're more worried about your backyard for obvious reasons. But one thing you're going to notice is you're going to have a lot of clippers diving down from up here, the higher latitudes out of Canada. So you're going to see a lot of areas of energy sort of diving down into here, stuff like that. That's because you have this persistent trough, this kind of avenue where these weaker northern stream pieces of energy kind of dive down. And I say weaker, but some of them can pack a punch. They will just continuously coat the ground with snow and bring light to moderate snowfall accumulations. And if the lakes weren't beginning to really start to freeze over, it could bring some very long duration lake effect snow events, and it still will for certain areas. But you continue to move forward, and you're starting to get into this coming Tuesday. Well, the next couple of days, here comes another clipper diving down. At the same time, we have a lot of moisture beginning to bubble up down here. Now you see all this green in Texas. I'm gonna zoom into that area here in a second. But this could be severe weather. But we get into Wednesday. Okay, we get into Thursday. Look at all this green showing up. That is that cutoff low, which is this thing right here. That thing right there, that is what's yanking up all that moisture from the south. So let's go back to this. And as we continue to go here, this system begins to cut. Remember, we were talking about the potential for a high impact snowstorm right in here. That's still there. There's been some model guys kind of dropped off on it, but there's still something here. But we're going to watch. And here comes a low pressure surface low developing off this cutoff low. And this begins to eject, but it kind of runs into a ridge and likely will not fully be able to cut. I mean, it does, but this is when the signals get kind of weird. So this low pressure, and the AI model picked up on this well. First off, all our cold air is bottled up here. It's kind of just going like this. You got kind of a nice ridge, broad ridge flex up into this area. But there's cold air kind of pushing down on this system. And eventually it hits that cold air, and then we get a winter weather event for certain areas of the Northeast. But it's still a lot of rain for a lot of areas. And then that moves through, and we get between that 7 to 10 day range, which is not necessarily the most reliable time frame. But this is when things get just weird. It gets active. We get this big cold front that begins to drop down, which makes sense if you compare it to the 500 millibar pattern. Big cold front drops down the middle of the country, and this is getting into like past day 10, and we start to get a lot of overrunning. That's just hanging out around this boundary, cold air right here, warm air down here, and then we start to get these waves of winter weather, just rain to the south with the warm areas, and here comes this overrunning event, which means moisture overrunning cold air, and we start to just get a very active pattern. And we get pretty far out here. We're getting to the 300-hour part, which is the 6th, 7th, and 8th, and you can just tell there's a lot going on. Multiple winter storms, multiple systems, a lot of energy flying around, cold air mainly bottled up to the northern states, but there's a lot going on here. And then finally, if you look at the very end of the run, it's about to break loose a winter storm across areas of the south, which I think as we get deeper into this pattern into February, I think it could support something like that. I don't think we're done with winter weather for the south, but this is getting all the way to the 9th and 10th, so that's pretty far out. Now the GFS, same thing, going to be a lot going on. You're going to see multiple little waves of snow impacting the Great Lakes region, the Northeast. There's multiple waves. And then we get into Wednesday. There's all that moisture bubbling up down near Texas. Maybe a snowstorm for areas with this cutoff low kind of creating its own cold air. New Mexico, Colorado. The system definitely does something a little bit different than the Euro. It sort of gets just split apart. Looks kind of weird. But they're still there, and eventually it does kind of take on a look as we get into the 1st of February of like the Euro. What's left over of this system begins to hit this cold air that's all bottled up here in Canada and the Northeast. And the GFS shows a scenario where you get a winter weather event for like New York City, surrounding areas, and then it gets another system going, and then this turns into more of a high impact winter weather event for the Northeast. No point in really zooming into this yet, but that is a time frame a lot of people up in the Northeast are watching. First few days into February. I think there is a storm signal right here for a winter storm for the Northeast. I think models are still trying to figure that one out. So I would say, that storm system is already on the table. I mean, it's already ongoing right now. This low is already moving onshore. It just takes forever to cross the entire country because it's cut off and it's not really attached to the main flow of things, the jet. So it just takes us sweet time maneuvering across the entire country over the next week and eventually connects the dots here in the Northeast and we get a winter storm. Now what happens after that? We get between that day 7 and 10 time frame. I think a lot of cold air has an opportunity to dump down to the country. And the GFS is different with the cold air. It's more of just a zonal cold air drop. You can see that 540 line sort of zonal, just kind of west to east. What happens after that? We get to day 10. We get all the way to the 5th of February. A lot of moisture to the south. And look, it wants to pop off a winter weather event in North Carolina. So that's a lot different than the Euro, right? And then things get different. On the latest GFS, it wants to kind of flex the ridge right here. And we get this weird pattern where we have just a trough kind of dipping over areas of the eastern U.S. And all of a sudden we get this winter storm that breaks out. And this is really far out, like 7, 8, 9th of February. Sweeps across the eastern U.S. But one thing to take from all this, guys, is the difference between the Euro in the GFS. And what it's telling me is that we're going to have some active weather. We're going to have multiple storm systems. Where's the cold air going to be? I think there's going to be a lot going on as we get into the first 10 days of February. And I think that as far as where the cold air is going to be, I think that's still trying to be resolved with the models. Now, here's here's a system in the long range, for like areas in the mid-Atlantic, the upper southeast. But one thing I'll look at here on the fly, which I wasn't really planning on doing here, is the Euro AI model. And folks, I'm telling you, the Euro AI model is a model that's beginning to get used a lot more. I think it's doing very well. I think that it can figure stuff out a little bit better. But this is the run from overnight. And this is temperatures compared to average, so the warmer colors above average temperatures. And it really likes the idea of those well above average temperatures. This is getting into the morning of the 1st and 2nd of February. And then here comes that cold air dropping by. I mean, the Euro AI model wants a full-fledged torch into the deep south. I mean, I'm talking about temperatures well into the 70s. But then look at the battleground of temperatures that shows up on the Euro AI model. This is crazy. Shows a sharp cold front digging down between day 7 and day 10 across the western and the central U.S. And eventually it beats down that ridge, at least tries, but most of this cold air just dumps into the central U.S. But there's a lot of model confusion out there on this pattern coming up. But we'll figure it out. Talking about the snow signal here, what I can tell you is you're going to continue to get this signal right here with these clippers swinging now. We're getting into Thursday. There's that signal for snow across sort of the southern high plains, Colorado, New Mexico, western sections of Oklahoma, Kansas, panhandle of Texas. And then it gets kind of weird after that. There's a signal that kind of sweeps across the middle of the country about a week from now. You got this signal across the northeast, which we just discussed. And then after that, everything just gets weird. One thing I'm noticing, though, once you get into the long range, the snow average begins to shift south somewhat. Still pretty loud to the north, but you can tell there is some ensemble runs that shows a bit of a signal for some runs that show snow pretty far south. So that's just something to watch. But man, this is going to be a tricky pattern to figure out. But let's talk about what we're a little bit more confident in, and that is severe weather chances. So the Storm Prediction Center, which by the way, this is weather-wise, it's an awesome site, guys. I mean, it's like Google Maps with combining it with the weather. Just phenomenal. So the Storm Prediction Center for Wednesday's already got a slight risk from Abilene all the way through San Angelo, through almost all the way to Big Spring, Big Lake. I mean, this entire area right here in sort of west central Texas, a slight risk, level 2 out of 5. Risk of severe weather. That can be anything. All hazards. Right now, we just know there's a 15% risk of severe weather. And then you go to day 5. Okay, and it shifts a little bit further east from Wichita Falls all the way down to just, I would say just north of San Antonio. This does include the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Almost over to Waco. 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles in a given location. So, they're already honking the horn, and this is all because of that cutoff low that we've been talking about. If we talk about the ingredients and what's overlapping, this is dew points, there's thermodynamics, and then there's kinematics. Thermodynamics is your favorable moisture at the surface, your CAPE levels, lapse rates, things like that. Your kinematics is, your how favorable is your wind flow aloft at the surface? Are you having turning with height? Is your the wind direction changing with height, allowing for the spin in the atmosphere, things like that. So your thermodynamics certainly are supportive for the heart of winter. So we start to move into Wednesday. There's your dew points starting to spike into the 60s, maybe even some 70s across southern areas of Texas. Now, this is the area they like. Now, just remember, the further west you get into Texas, the higher up you get in elevation. It's like a plateau. So you don't need very high dew points higher up. Okay, dew points in the 50s will work. So the dew points are climbing into the 50s in that area of interest, that 15% risk area for Wednesday. And you continue into Thursday, and then the dew points spike even more. I mean, they get all the way into the low 60s, all the way up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we just got this plume of moist air. We call it a warm or moist sector. So plenty of moist air at the surface. Once you start to get dew points into the 60s, that's basically starting to get into air where you can really feel the moist air, the moistness, if you will, in the air, humidity. Okay, so we know the dew points will be supported for the most part. Now, what about your CAPE levels in response? It's not your CAPE levels. Here we go. CAPE levels in response. We move this forward. We get into Wednesday afternoon, and here's the CAPE level spiking. Not very high on the euro, but you might not need a lot of fuel in the atmosphere. Just a few 100s, like 400 or 500 joules per kilogram at most. Not a lot. It's higher down here, but will you have better flow aloft? Not quite sure, but I'm so used to talking about freezing rain. I think that's why I said a few 100ths of an inch. But a few, 300, 400, 500 joules per kilogram of CAPE. Once you start getting over 1,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE, then you're working with a lot of fuel in the atmosphere. It's your CAPE levels, storm fuel. And then you look at, say, your kinematic. So this is the 500 millibar flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, not the low levels. We'll look at the low level jet when we need to. But you can tell there's a lot of southwesterly flow. You see these wind barbs, how they're pointing to the southwest on the flag of the wind barb. Well, that means the flow is coming out of that direction, which is the southwest. So you got a lot of flow working through this area, kind of overlapping that those CAPE levels and moisture at the surface. So you have the overlapping ingredients that can create severe weather. And just taking a look at what the Euro shows as far as, and this is just a global model. It's not going to show exactly what these storms are going to look like. We're going to need to get into these short-range models to really understand the structure of these storms. But here it is, just showing a lot of stormy activity across Texas. Heck, even getting into Oklahoma. And then we get into Thursday morning, and it shows a lot of storm action. And then this is Thursday afternoon. It shows just a lot of yellows and oranges, which means stormy weather. So we got to watch this. We're going to get more and more detailed on this as we get closer. But if you live in Texas, we're not talking about a winter storm this time. We're talking about severe weather chances. So as far as today's weather, it's active in the southwest for once. We're going to continue to get rain and maybe even some storms. But in those higher elevations, we do have winter weather alerts, winter weather advisories, or in the purple, winter storm warnings in the pink. And we continue to have special weather statements along the Carolina and Georgia coastline because we still have a little bit of snow on the ground just for the refreezing of the snow. But I think this will be the last morning we see this, I think. But lake effect snow warnings off Lake Ontario and just a couple lingering winter weather advisories. And we do have some cold weather advisories. The middle of the country is pretty quiet, though. Not really a whole lot going on at all. Quiet conditions. If we do look at the risk of thunderstorms, we will have them. Let's get this off. We do have them for the deep south. No severe weather expected. Can't rule out a strong storm, though. And then areas of Southern California could get some thunderstorms. And then the risk of flash flooding. Just a marginal risk down here across areas of the deep south, southeast areas of Texas. Just a 5% risk of flooding. But if you take a closer look at areas of Southern California, north of LA, and then west of LA, you certainly have a higher risk of flash flooding, a slight risk, 15% risk of flash flood guidance being met within 25 miles of any given location. So be aware of that, especially the fact that you guys have not received a lot of rain lately. You don't want to get too much too fast. You need the rain with the wildfires, but you don't want to get too fast. The southeast, it's a nice start for some. We got rain beginning to enter and take over Mississippi. It's going to get into northern Alabama, get into middle Tennessee later this afternoon. And then more rain will really get going this evening. So it'll continue just to be a wet day for Mississippi. Heavier rain will begin to move into Alabama. This rain will make it all the way up into Tennessee this evening. And then one thing I want to watch is this rain mixing with snow in northern Tennessee and northeast Tennessee. I think we need to watch out for, some slushy accumulation on the northern edge. There's just enough cold air on top. So I do want to watch this. I'll talk about this here in a second. I'll show you their accumulation map from Morristown here in a second. But rain does start to move across northern Georgia, the upstate of South Carolina. Then it begins to take over all of South Carolina, especially southern North Carolina. It's still raining back in Alabama. And there's just that little bit of snow. I think northeast Tennessee, if you're tuning in from the Tri-Cities region, I think you could get, don't let it surprise you. I think tomorrow morning you could be waking up to some flakes flying around, some wet snowflakes, and certainly could add up a little bit. Not much, but, a little surprise is possible. And then the rain continues tomorrow for the Carolinas and Georgia. And then I think by the time we get to tomorrow evening, it's about done. But here's this, little snow event. My buddy that lives up here, I think he lives in Johnson City. He's been following, I think his Twitter name is Storm Tracker Zacher, but he's very passionate about weather, especially winter weather. But he's been tracking this for a few days now. They're just going for an inch or less totals, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tries to sneak and get an inch up here with this. This could overachieve. Normally the northern edge of these storm systems like this normally have a little bit more moisture with it than what's modeled. So we'll watch for this little light snowfall event in this area. The Northeast, we're just going to have bursts of snow today, but the main story is just consistent lake effect snows off Lake Ontario. We're getting into this evening. You can see the snows flying around, and this will continue all the way through tomorrow. And then another big clipper moves down late tomorrow evening, and then this is going to bring some wild weather with it. I think we will have some snow squalls. Look at this kind of a line of snow right here with this cold front. It's going to be a wintry week for the Northeast. Everybody else is going to start baking, getting warm, but the Northeast will remain cold. But you got to watch this. We'll talk about more on this when we know a little bit more. But some of these snowfall maps already are accounting for that snow moving in for Tuesday. But this is only accounting for between now and 6 a.m. tomorrow, several inches of snow in the Tug Hill Plateau. So you'll continue to get a lot. A little bit of snow is possible south of Buffalo, but not a lot. But, man, Tug Hill Plateau, that orange area, I mean, that's, over 12 inches of snow, a foot being possible. And then this is accounting for between now and 7 a.m. Wednesday. So definitely picking up on some heavier snowfall accumulations, even outside of the lake effect snow belt, if you will. So a few to several inches of snow in certain areas. The south central U.S. will continue to just get rounds of showers and even storms in southeast Texas and getting all the way up into Shreveport, Louisiana. This is not an historic winter storm. Around this time last week, you were preparing for a big-time winter storm. This time, this is just rain, which you typically get in the winter. This is heavy rain, rounds of heavy rain. This is Sunday afternoon. You continue to get this in this blast through Mississippi. And we'll continue just to get a lot of rain. What's wild is the storm looks similar to the one we got last week, except the moisture is definitely further north. But the way it's kind of popping off the Gulf here, it looks similar, there's just no cold air. So this will continue over the next 24 hours. I don't think this rain will get very far north, though. But between now and tomorrow evening, southeastern Texas, over an inch of rain is possible. Central, northern areas of Louisiana, inch, maybe 2 inches of rain is possible. Jackson around an inch and a half. So southern areas of Louisiana, not as much. But I think most of your snow is melted down here. Might have a little bit left on the ground, but definitely just a good old washout on the way over the next 36 hours. The north central U.S., quiet this morning. Maybe it's just some blustery snow showers throughout the UP today. Very possible. And then that clipper starts to dive in. I think most of it will miss the Great Lakes region and the Midwest to the east, but could not rule out. Here it comes. This is tomorrow evening. This is a cold front diving in, coming south over Lake Superior. Tomorrow evening, you see this band? I know I got people tuning in from the UP. Don't let this catch you off guard. We'll talk about it more tomorrow morning because it'll be the day of. But this band of snow is going to be wild. That's going to be a sharp cutoff. Definitely a snow squall will be associated with that. And then another shot of cold air behind it. But speaking of the western U.S., there's nothing really going on except the southwest. So just to zoom into this area, we're getting some much-needed rain throughout the day. This evening, the overnight hours, some thunderstorms are possible. This will continue to spin along the southern California coastline. And this upper-level low will begin to move inland and just continue to spin moisture across areas of southern Nevada, Arizona. Some certain areas that have just not seen a lot of rain since like October will get some much-needed rain. And rainfall between now and the next 3 days. Another half an inch is possible in LA. and then surrounding areas maybe a little bit more. Phoenix, where are you, Phoenix? Wow. Okay. Can't find Phoenix. But Flagstaff, and y'all are probably yelling at me like, Mitch, man, you don't know your geography. But Phoenix could get a little bit of rain from this. Tucson down here, I'm not expecting a whole lot, but it's very possible. There it is, Phoenix, right there. Boom. I'm blind. A little bit of rain in Phoenix, not expecting a lot, but we'll see what happens. And then, I mean, all the way up to even Las Vegas. I mean, Las Vegas going for around 1/10 of an inch of rain, so definitely could use a little bit. Use a lot of rain. You just don't want it all at one time. And then the higher elevations will get several inches of snow, especially these higher peaks just outside of LA. Could get over a foot, so it might be one of those situations where you're in LA and then you look off in the mountains in the distance and they got snow on them, which happens sometimes. But the eastern U.S., this is the temperatures. Okay, and then the western U.S., this is the temperature. So running out of gas here, almost 40 minutes strong. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day, and we'll do it again tomorrow morning. Talk to you soon.